This is Johann Gylfason, and you're listening to the Talk Carby to Me podcast.
We had a little bit of a hiatus in May, so we're back today, June 1st.
Nice.
Uh,
Yep.
First and foremost, happy Pride Month,
Happy
everyone.
Pride Month.
A lot of things going around that topic. But as most of people that know me know, I'm a big supporter of the Pride community. I think they're a great community. I've always had fun hanging out with my friends that are part of that community, and I support everyone doing exactly what they love to do.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like I am from Iceland, and Pride is like a big thing over there. Like the Capitol Pride Parade usually features the mayor in drag. I mean, it's just, everyone's grandma's out there. It's fine. The only thing that I think the controversy right now is they're starting to involve kids in a lot of these things. Like as far as educating them about the community and everything, and I'm just not behind that, and most people are not. I think that's really where most of the controversy is, because I'm a live and let live guy, man. Like I remember recently we went to Key West, and man, there was all these like super jack dudes with tattoos, bald headed, tough looking, like holding hands walking down the street. It was great. So you go down the street, drag queens are everywhere. Like I don't have a problem with that. It's just it is what it is. But like some of this stuff, like I said, when we're kind of marketing this towards children, I think that that's just a lot of people find that uncomfortable, and I find that to be just a bit too far. So, but as far as people being comfortable in their sexuality or their identity, that's great. I support that. So, like that's just, and I think most people feel that way, actually.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, my opinion on it too is there are plenty of ways to spread awareness, compassion, acceptance, knowledge about the community. Just maybe not in the most extreme of ways, which unfortunately some organizations have chosen to do. But what do we know?
Right? We're just meatheads. We don't know politics.
Yeah, we pick things up and we put them down.
Correct.
So we're back today with my good friend Johann Gylfason. I think I said that
You
right.
got it. Pretty good.
As he's already alluded to, my friend here is an Iceland native. So
Mhm.
technically, that makes you part Viking, right?
It makes me 100% Viking, actually. I did my 23andMe with my family last year, actually, and was like 98.4% capital region Icelandic. So, like, literally, my hometown is in my DNA. So, I'm very much a native Icelander. So, my history with that, and the reason probably is kind of confusing, my English is really, really good. Even though English is my second language, I moved back and forth most of my childhood. So, my parents were educated in the United States. They got their master's degrees up here. And then they decided to, work there for a while because dad got like job offers and stuff. And we lived in upstate New York. We lived in Massachusetts, even in Pittsburgh up north. Went back to Iceland, did most of my kind of basic education there. And then I came to the US during high school, and I did my college education here too. So it's kind of like I have this real interesting back and forth experience where I've mastered both languages really well. Because I tell people I'm foreign, and they kind of like, okay, yeah, he maybe he has parents that are from there or whatever, and I'm like, no, I actually grew up there. I just I happened to pick up English, when I was very young, so my pronunciation is very good. So I don't have like a cool Icelandic accent. It actually works against me a little bit. I'd make more money if I had one.
It's true. You do speak very good English. I don't think I ever would have guessed um, that you were foreign. So what's that growing up experience like? The difference between like America and Iceland?
It's I kind of have a pretty unique experience just based on how much I move back and forth in a different times. So plus there's not a lot of Icelanders. There's only about 390,000 of us. So like there's a million people just in this county I live in right here in in Raleigh, Wake County. But it was very interesting because I remember myself first in the U.S. So when I was a kid, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, I was in the U.S. and I was very Americanized. So I kind of rejected the whole Icelandic thing. As a kid, you don't want to be different. I had a weird name. I had this full head of like white blonde hair, and I was a head taller than everyone else. And my parents spoke this like weird language. I just hated it. I was just rejected the whole thing. And when I was 8, we moved back. And just to give you an example of the culture shock, my grandfather thought it would be funny to serve a dish called svith. So svith is actually a sheep's face. So if you look that, that up, it's literally like on the plate, you have a half of a head, eyeball, tongue, the whole 9 yards. It kind of looks like a person almost, and it has that kind of like, I'm dead look. And I'm looking at this plate like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? I'm used to like hamburger helper and stuff, man, and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And
Holy
here
shit!
the family are. Oh yeah, they're like digging the eyeball out, eating it. It's like, ooh, this is the best part. I was absolutely traumatized. Like, what? My parents are savages. But that's just one of the many kind of like stark differences in the cultures. And kind of growing up in between there has given me a really unique perspective on most things, actually. I'm kind of an outsider looking in both cultures.
Yeah, I'm looking. I just googled this. So this is funny. There are now two dishes that someone's brought up to me today. So from Iceland. So you hit this one on the head. The svid, I think.
Was it the shark they talked about? It was probably the shark.
Yeah. So my client is going to Iceland next week for 2 weeks, and she was like, "Oh, apparently there's this like fermented shark that that is a dish."
It's very interesting. So it's the Greenland shark lives like under the ice sheet of Greenland, and they have a natural antifreeze, and they also live to be over 400 years old. So they found specimens with like hooks from like the 1620s and stuff. So the problem is this antifreeze is toxic. So if you eat the shark right off the bat, it kills you. So for some reason, my ancestors found out that if you bury it for like 6 months, and I think hang it up for another few months or something, there's a whole process. So basically, by the time like your friend will eat this fish, it will have been dead for over a year, and you eat it raw. The thing, and the fish is so toxic that microbes can't grow on it. And
Wow.
another thing is that shark can't urinate, so it holds all that kind of urine in their tissues. So basically, you're taking eating a square of just pure piss. And we washed this down with this drink called brennivin, which originally was known as Black Death. And you use this schnapps as a chaser to get rid of the shark flavor.
Holy shit!
Yeah, it's rough. It's one of those like you either eat the rotten shark or you starve to death because life in Iceland was very rough for a very long time. We've only recently kind of had it good. So it's just like, you don't have anything really that grows there because it's tundra. So you have whatever you can get out of the ocean and whatever animals you have, that's your food. That's it. And if your animals die, then you have to eat whatever the ocean offers. And if it offers you the toxic fish, then you got to eat the toxic fish. You got to figure it out. But we don't like generally eat this all the time. Most of these foods that we hear about in Iceland is called þorramattur. And þorramattur is kind of the old Icelandic way. So it's the sheep face, the shark. There's also like pickled sheep testicles, uh, you know, stuff like which is apparently really good. That's the one that's like the best out of them. Apparently, the testicles are pretty spot on. But we usually eat, and skate is another one. Skate is a form of manta ray. Smells absolutely terrible, just terrible, terrible fish. But we eat this as a reminder of how difficult life used to be, as an appreciation thing. But nowadays, Icelanders just kind of eat like Americans, to be quite honest. We're just not good.
That's some. Those are some wild dishes, man.
Yeah, it really is. It's like even most Icelanders don't do those. Like I know some Icelanders have never done most of those things. Like for example, me, I've never done the testicles before. Like I've done the shark, I've done the face and everything. And by the way, Icelanders love sheep face. They actually have it in a jam that you can spread on your bread, sheep face jam. And
Wow.
there's a drive-through in Reykjavik, the capital, that's open 24 hours a day where you can get your fix of sheep face, man. So uh, but the other ones, not so much. But it's not that common. It's becoming more common now because tourists come in want to experience like real Icelandic stuff. So we offer that a lot. But I feel like they're watering it down a little bit because we just went a few weeks ago with my family, and my oldest son hadn't had it yet, and we got him some, and I thought it was kind of weak. I keep hearing there's like a tourist shark and there's a local shark, so the tourists can't handle the real stuff. Apparently, they just like throw up everywhere. Apparently, so
It's funny that you look at all these other countries and you see their culture and you see their food, and so much of it is rooted in like their ancestry. And then you look at the United States of America and you Google like what's our national dish, which for some reason I was on this topic the other day.
Was that like a hamburger?
It's a hamburger.
Yeah.
It's straight up bun, hamburger, that's it. Not even they didn't bother to throw cheese on like one of the recognition for it. So uh, definitely wild by comparison.
Oh yeah. So for us, Icelanders are a little bit interesting when it comes to food. So there was a guy about 100 years ago, a nutritionist, and he was making the case that Icelandic nationals that have been in Iceland have a lower need for vitamin C than other populations. And like it actually is true. He proved this by locking himself away for an entire year and eating nothing but reindeer for that whole year to see what happened. And he never developed scurvy, which is the vitamin C deficiency. And his point was is not a lot of things in Iceland grow that have a lot of vitamin C. There's just it's tundra. There's not we don't have crops and stuff. And the Icelanders that couldn't handle a low vitamin C diet died a long time ago and didn't reproduce. So you ended up with a population very resistant to scurvy. And it's one of the things that made us great sailors. We can go far, distances without our teeth falling out, which was was a huge problem back in the day, like a very big problem. The British actually solved this problem only a few hundred years ago. They still call them limeys. They get like this thing of lime juice, and each sailor would take like a spoonful of the stuff, and it would prevent scurvy. And yeah, it's stuck to this day. British people are known as limeys for that reason.
Huh. That makes a lot of sense. That's interesting. Yeah, because if it's tundra, yeah, you're not gonna get much. You're not gonna get much for crops.
No, like to this day, the only thing we can grow are in greenhouses, and they have a big industry with that because they put the greenhouses on top of some of the more geothermically active areas. So those areas, they're literally the ground is just steaming. It's like it's on fire. It's crazy to look at. And they put these giant greenhouses there, and the earth actually heats it up. So they don't have to use as much energy to keep it going. Plus, the energy in Iceland is so cheap because everything is like 99% renewable over there. Like we get energy just from the ground because it's a volcanic island. You drill a hole into the ground and boom, you got steam. Same thing with hydroelectric stuff. We have so many rivers and waterfalls everywhere. We can build dams all over the place, and we have so many remote areas in Iceland because basically the center of the country is uninhabitable. You can only live and go around the perimeter, and there are all these areas in the middle that are very beautiful. You see them a lot in promotional stuff, but in reality, you literally have to ride horseback like for 2 hours just to get to it. Like there's
Hmm.
no roads at all. So but if you build a dam in an area like that, I mean, nobody even, nobody goes there. You don't notice. So for us, energy is very cheap. So they have a very, pretty solid geothermal greenhouse system, and we make enough food where we can actually feed ourselves with it. And on top of that, we demand that any foreign company that comes in that does business there, they have to buy our stuff. So McDonald's, fun fact, failed in Iceland and they just went bankrupt. They couldn't make it work. And it's the only country in the world where that has happened. And the reason it happened is because the costs were so, they were so high due to this demand. Like, we want you to use our beef and our vegetables, and they're very high quality. I mean, our cows are grass fed. We have this geothermal hydroponic growing system that makes very high quality vegetables and stuff. So it's really good food over there. And that was one thing that we really noticed when we went over there last time, especially with all the boys that hadn't been there, is even when you get gas station food, it's still really high quality and good. Like, you can get a sandwich out there and it's just all like just natural ingredients. There's none of this hyper processed garbage like here. Like, if you buy a loaf of bread in Iceland, you got to eat it pretty quickly because within about 3 or 4 days it starts molding because bread is supposed to mold. There's like a running joke over in Iceland that if you go to America and get bread, it'll rust before it molds because of all the preservatives and stuff. So being there for even just like a week and a half, eating the food there, I just felt so much better. Plus, I lost like 7 pounds, even though I was eating whatever I wanted and I was drinking. But just because the quality of the food and how much I was moving around, because that's the lifestyle over there, I lost weight. And I'm a guy that's on my feet generally. Like, I don't have an office job, as you know. I move around, so it wasn't that much different. But I attribute it to a lot of it to the food, actually.
What's funny, what you mentioned that McDonald's failed in Iceland. Iceland actually has a lower obesity rate than the United States, where McDonald's thrives.
Well, saying it's lower is an understatement. I was there for 10 days. I can count on one hand how many morbidly obese people I saw. So, like everywhere you went, people were pretty much in normal proportions, like they used to be. It was refreshing to see. But also in Iceland, it's a very big part of the culture to do active things, like climb mountains and hike. And of course, you have endless opportunities. I mean, you've seen the videos and promotional stuff. Everywhere you go and hike, it's just amazing. You know, it just looks like a portrait. So that helps. But it's just a big part of the culture. We walk places, we ride bikes places. You know, we do things. You know, we're not sitting around. And when you go and look around, there's like, okay, this is completely different. I think like we saw one really big guy twice, and it was the same American tourist. So it's like the only really big guy we saw was an American guy.
It's like, hey, I know you.
Hey, Phil.
So, uh, as far as like, so you look back like lineage and whatnot, Viking culture, like, is that still rooted? Do you still see a lot of that like going on today? And like when you're out in Iceland and
It's actually part of our education system. We learn about the Viking sagas. We have to memorize all these poems and stuff. But yeah, it's a very closely entwined with our culture, and it's a part of it because the people that settled Iceland were known as Vikings. I mean, these are the people that we know, you know, from the TV shows and everything. Though those TV shows and movies drive me nuts. They're not very accurate. They always portray the Vikings as like dirty and grimy. Mm-mm. So like Vikings were some of the cleanest, well-groomed dudes out there. They were like the metrosexuals of the area. This is another fun fact. Part of every Viking like battle kit was a grooming kit for their beards, and they all dyed it blonde. Like we're not all blonde. Everyone to this day thinks we're all blonde. That's it. Blonde, blue eye. That's it. No, we have a slightly higher percentage than most of Europe, but those dudes use like lye and stuff to get like that platinum blonde look. So they were big into that, you know, while they were murdering the hell out of people. But you got to look good doing it, right?
yeah. So what about the movie? Have you seen the movie The Northman?
I think I saw some of it. It was, I think Willem Dafoe's in it. I think.
Is he in that one?
I
I'm not
think
sure. It's
he's in one of them. Whatever. I don't know. I didn't really give it a chance because it's just I don't know. It drives me nuts. Like they're dirty. The accents are all wrong. It doesn't match up with what I learned in school about Vikings. Now they were violent. They got the violence part right, but all the other stuff is just like, yeah, no, that's just that's just inaccurate. So it kind of drives me nuts. Like the horn helmet thing. No, I got one right here. Here we go. This guy right here. This is bullshit. Nobody wore a helmet like that because this is a handle. You don't go into battle with a handle on your fucking head, right? You're gonna die. So it's little stuff like that that kind of. But I don't take it too personally. But it's these people are appropriating my culture, so and that's a bad thing.
yeah. My favorite thing about probably the Vikings, and obviously as someone who I'm not from that lineage, so my take on this is going to be a little different. Is that concept of burning the ships?
Yeah, for the funeral.
Well, not even for that, right? Well, is it? It was the Vikings, right? When they would invade another nation, they would burn all the ships that they showed up on, so they had no choice but to conquer.
I mean, that's one strategy, yeah. Generally, but so when you talk about Vikings, you have to separate it. So you had the Viking raiders, which is what most of us are familiar with. So these are guys that went on boats called long ships, which were, they carried a lot of men, but had very shallow bottoms, so they could go through rivers, and they can also go very quickly onto shore, and they go in and basically burn, rape, pillage, do their thing, and then run back to the ship with their loot and get the hell out of Dodge. Then you also have the Vikings that were basically mercenaries and soldiers, and these were the guys that, like, for example, conquered England in 1066. William the Conqueror, who before he was William the Conqueror, fun fact, he was known as William the Bastard. So him conquering the England really earned him a better nickname. But those are two completely separate issues. And you also had the Vikings who were explorers, like Leif Erikson, who actually found America like 400 years before Columbus found it. So they actually had a settlement over there in Newfoundland. So there's kind of like three branches of the Vikings. You got to, so you're talking about different things. Now, um, the Viking raiders weren't too worried about that. They were just going in and getting loot and women. That's it. They were basically they're pretty much assholes, to be quite honest. I don't know why the Vikings have gotten such of a whitewashing. Basically, everyone's like, "Oh, Vikings cool," and I'm all like, "Have you read the stories? They were actually kind of dicks. Like they were not the nicest guys, you know." They actually invented castles in Europe with the moats because of the Vikings. So they'd come out there and ring the bell, and everyone would run to the castle, and they'd shut the moat or whatever, the gate. And of course, the raiders didn't carry siege equipment, so that kind of ruined the fun for everyone, right? So it was, I mean, it was a big problem for a long time.
Yeah.
And just imagine it from the perspective of, say, an Irishman. Like, you're in your village, knee deep in mud, raising your pigs or whatever. Your life expectancy is like what, like 40 years old? Half your kids have died of like diseases or whatever. And then, oh, you see my guys around the horizon coming in to just burn your shit to the ground. Like, great. And a thousand years later, we're like, man, those guys were so cool. Can you imagine the reaction from the farmer back then? Like, really? I don't think so. So
I mean, if you look around today, farmers are under attack again. They're just not from the Vikings.
no, not from the Vikings. So they're more, being attacked from the government a little bit. So not every bit as dramatic, but not quite as doesn't hurt quite as much. Like, you lose your farm, okay, but not in a different way.
Yeah, so that's a crazy topic too that's starting to develop. Like you have I mean, I guess if you were look at like what kind of started it all, you have successes in like Beyond Meat, Beyond Burger, all the kind of vegan stuff and shit that they're putting together in labs. Then you go ahead and you look at, well, okay, like meat is bad, even though that's just recently been disproven in a study. And now we're talking about we have, climate change and the effect of agriculture on climate change. And they're looking at it from the standpoint, if we just stop farming altogether, we will completely save the world. When some of the, I mean, actual effects are like 33% of all carbon emissions on the planet come from the United States. There's like what 275 other countries. So even if we
Not even that high. United States is almost down to single digits now because the carbon emissions in the U.S. have flatlined for the last 15 years. So the Americans actually got pretty good control over it. The problem is the developing world. So China, India, Africa right now, they've really overtaken us. And the thing with farming too, interesting fact, America is the breadbasket of the world right now. We have the best farming land on the planet, bar none, and we have a lot of it. So if you ever look at, like, I think it's called the topography, the actual like elevation of countries, you have the mountains in the west in California, and then of course you have a little bit of the Appalachian Mountains on the east, and in between is just flat and fertile for just states and like thousands of miles of just farmland. And if we stop farming, first of all, even if we reduce our efficiency, a lot of people starve, like a lot of people. And if we implement a lot of what these climate change activists want, like, we're going to end up with famines that'll end up killing billions, honestly. And the result of this, by their own admission, is going to be a marginal reduction in carbon dioxide. So I'm all like, I don't think that's a really good trade-off. I mean, there are other ways that we can, reduce our output. One of them, of course, is nuclear, which I'm a big proponent of.
same.
Yeah, I mean, it literally, nuclear satisfies both sides. On one side, the left wants, they want to reduce carbon dioxide output. The right wants cheap and affordable energy, and nuclear gives you both. So I don't know why that's not more part of the conversation. But as far as the cow farts, the methane, that's literally like an argument that cow farts are killing the world. Um,
Oh, he's not kidding.
Yeah, that's a real thing. There are people that are very concerned about this, and we should all eat bugs and vegetables because cow farts. I don't think so. I think the problem is more like coal power plants and cars and stuff that run off gasoline, not cow farts. So if we can get that more under control, and again, if we go electric with vehicles and power them with nuclear power, I mean, the carbon output there is zero. Like, just invest in that. Of course, solar and wind is great. They're definitely innovating there, and it's getting better. But in the end, we need cheap power. And if we get rid of fossil fuels without having a viable alternative like nuclear, we're going to cause a lot more harm than good, in my opinion. So it's kind of like one of those, a lot of people like arguing whether climate change is real or not. I don't know. I lift weights for a living, man, and teach people how to lift weights. I don't know that. I'm not a scientist. So I feel like that conversation isn't particularly useful, but it's more like, okay, how can we find a solution that everyone's happy with that gets both of us where we want to go? And I think that's the conversation that we're not having. I mean, it's starting a little bit, I actually read a book. I highly recommend it. Michael Schellenberger's Apocalypse Never. He's old school environmentalist guy, but he goes through this kind of the climate hysteria industry, basically. And it seems like with these particular individuals, we see them a lot in politics. All the solutions for climate change is giving them more money. And it's just like, yeah, that's the solution is me just to hand over cash to you. I think maybe we could figure out another solution. So, and he kind of exposes that there's a lot of politics in it. There's a lot of money in it. But I think we just really just need to come together and be like, okay, let's all agree that this is a problem that needs to be solved. What are the best options, and how do we implement these options without causing too much harm? And just getting rid of meat is just, first of all, that's not going to happen. Second of all, like, is the vegan diet even something we all want to do? I mean, it works for some people, but there are a lot of people that just don't do well with it. So, and I know a lot of people have done both. I don't know people that have done poorly with it. I know people that have thrived with it. So, but to implement this diet onto the entire human race, just because to solve a problem, which may or may not solve the problem, is just I don't think that's really a reasonable solution to that at all.
Yeah, so we've got phase 2, which is gonna be coming soon. So, I believe it's in I wanna say it is somewhere in Europe, maybe it's Portugal, don't quote me on that, I'll have to double check that, but there is a company called Good Meat, and what they do is they acquire, cells from, like, a chicken. I believe right now the one that they have at market is chicken, and they grow it in a petri dish in a lab, and they grow it into a full chicken breast.
Right,
Right? So basically, you're cloning a chicken, and then they sell it. They use it for chicken nuggets, and they're doing it's very, very, very expensive to produce. It's also very, very expensive to purchase. It's almost I want
right.
to say last time I looked, it's like 4 to 5 times more expensive per pound to get it.
And that's not unusual. Anytime you have a new technology, it's going to be more expensive. That's just economics. It's like flat screen TVs, for example. When they first came out, they were like 10, 15 grand. Like, only really the rich and the affluent could afford them. And as people innovated and they started, improving the manufacturing process, I mean, you can get a pretty big screen, like a big flat screen TV for like $400, $500 now. Like if you spend like 2 grand, you're buying a really, really nice TV now. So it's one of those things with that. I think innovation is going to drive the cost down, but you also got to look at why it's so expensive. And one of the reasons is energy. There's a lot of energy that goes into that process. So this again goes back to the nuclear option. If we're just flooded with cheap energy, solutions like that are going to look a lot more attractive. Same thing with water issues around the world. One of the big issue isn't that we don't have water. I mean, we're covered in water. The Earth is like 3/4 water. The problem is the salt in the water, and there are desalinization options available. They do it a lot in Israel, actually. And the only limiting factor there, again, is energy. It's expensive. They have to like boil the water and separate the salt and everything. But if you have basically unlimited energy or cheap energy, that's not an issue anymore. So a lot of these problems that we're facing right now, I think, can be solved with just building, honestly, a fuck shit ton of nuclear power plants. Just a lot of them. Build 1,000 of the damn things.
You know the answer to why that's not coming.
Well, that's the question. The oil companies won't let it happen. That's the big thing.
Correct.
And the oil companies, fun fact, are also the ones that are basically funding all the other alternatives, the solar and the wind. They just started selling that. So nuclear is the only real threat to fossil fuels. So the oil companies, of course, are completely against that. And Schellenberger makes that point in his book. He was saying, look, a lot of these people, these environmentalists right now, that are you see that are very prominent on TV, they're very anti-nuclear, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. They're like, wait a minute, this seems to be like the best solution. And the conspiracy theory is, and I don't know if I completely buy into this, but it makes you think a little bit, is that the oil companies are funding the extreme environmental agenda.
Which would make sense.
Yeah, because they're profiting off of this. I mean, they're selling oil regardless. Now they're also selling solar and wind, and they're also keeping nuclear out of the equation because they're not in the nuclear business for the most part. And nuclear actually threatens the fossil fuel industry because if we go full nuclear, we don't need as much oil and gas. We just don't. We get energy from there. And they know that solar and wind is never going to overtake fossil fuels, at least not anytime soon. So that's he kind of brought that point up, and I was like, you know what, that sort of makes sense in a way, because I never really understood just the aversion to nuclear. And there was another thing. I don't know if you saw this. It was a special on Netflix. Bill Gates had this a couple years ago, and he was talking about, it was basically Bill Gates saves the world, and he was talking about his solutions or whatever. But anyway, he was talking about nuclear, and he started talking to a lot of people in the business, and they were saying like, look, we have nuclear, like plans for nuclear reactors that can run off of nuclear waste. And the guy who was talking to said there's enough nuclear waste in like one waste site in Kentucky or something to power the US for 200 years by itself. So it's just like we solved the nuclear waste problem, which is one of the big arguments against nuclear. We also solved the meltdown problem because reactors now can run off of air, like as far as the coolant. So if it melts down, it just shuts off. It doesn't turn into Chernobyl. And Chernobyl, I mean, that's not really a fair comparison anyway, because it was a Soviet nuclear reactor that was run poorly by Soviet standards. And it didn't even have a protective dome over it. Like reactors now have this huge dome over the reactor they can fly a 747 into, and it wouldn't even like phase it. So even if it goes into full meltdown, all that radiation will be contained within the dome. Like we've solved all these problems already. But again, I really think that nuclear is a threat to the status quo and will cost a lot of people a lot of money. So I'm not going to let it happen. And if we're making the argument that the world's going to end, I think we need to do some pretty drastic shit, right? Like we're all going to die, right? It's like we're all going to die, but we can't do nuclear though because it's dirty. Like, wait, what? Aren't we all?
Mhm.
You just said we're all going to die. Like, so it,
This whole topic kind of like leads into like one of the things that we've been touching on in the previous few episodes, and this will kind of segue us into kind of the next thing that I want to hear your take on.
all right.
Our entire existence as a country is based on the fact that we will profit on a crisis. Our entire system is built to profit off of crisis. You look at our economy throughout the years, anytime we are at war, military industrial complex, right? All money gets spent, economy is always up. You look at the pandemic, right? Any kind of global health crisis, right? The COVID pandemic, right? Pfizer, pharmaceutical companies, money through the roof. You look at now you have like the energy crisis and things like that. To put it in perspective, when we're talking about nuclear, I think it's the problem with nuclear is the word itself. It scares people, so it's very easy to be like, "Haha, this is bad, Chernobyl, nuclear." And you have like this kind of like fear effect in people that are like have create this aversion. Whereas there's a big difference between a nuclear warhead and a nuclear reactor. They serve two different functions. It's like it's just that they're in 2 different like, it's like ice and water where they're similar compounds, but it's a
Also,
different.
like, there's nuclear medicine. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, hey, if you have cancer, they're going to do that. So there are positive applications that people know about.
Yeah. So now we're faced with another crisis, right? That being the obesity crisis,
Oh yeah.
right? So we've known since what, 1990 probably, that America has been getting fatter and fatter and fatter. We have a pretty good understanding why. We know that whole foods are better for you. People don't exercise. People are glued to TV screens. Americans work too much. They don't really prioritize their own health. They've got a lot going on. Insert any other struggle and things of that nature. And now we have suddenly the savior has emerged to the obesity crisis. And what is it? It is Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, all these injections that are typically made for diabetics and to help them go on. But if you happen to not be diabetic and you take them, you lose weight, as we discussed, right? So that's probably going to be the big thing, probably as the FDA approves the third one coming up. And that's obviously a huge trend. So when you look at like obesity itself as a crisis, and we had a debate on the show before where I took the state. We posed the question: is obesity a choice, or is it a chronic illness? And chronic illness in the sense of like you are born and you are now destined to be obese because you caught the illness, not at end stage where of course it's an illness that you have to treat, but looking at it from that perspective, like where do you kind of like with your experience and what you've seen and working in the personal training industry, like where do you kind of fall on that scale there?
So yeah, that's a lot right there. That's a very difficult topic to address. So as far as the cause of obesity, we humans have been basically half starved like 99.9% of our existence. So only in the last about 100 years have we really had food where it was available 24/7. I mean, you can get bananas at any grocery store all year round and they're ready to go. This was never an option for our ancestors. So the human condition basically is you have food, you eat as much as you can while you can, and then you gather something or kill something later on. So we are programmed to basically eat as much food as possible and store as much food as possible because the harsh winter or the famine is coming around. The problem is that we're never having this famine. So these like inclinations, survival instincts, really as humans, are still with us, except we can indulge in them. So it's not really a disease so much. It's actually evolution doing its thing correctly. It's just we've created a situation where that's a negative thing. So I will say the solution to it is not easy, but the first thing we have to do is admit that we have a problem and admit that each individual person is at fault for their own condition. And the culture right now is completely the opposite. Right now we have, I guess, fat acceptance, body positivity, all that. And which I don't necessarily want people to feel bad about themselves, but the thing is, like, if you're obese, like, you're not an amputee, like, you're not missing an eye, or you know what I mean. It's not the same thing. Body positivity, I always imagine somebody that had like really bad burns or a birth defect or something to accept, or they're really short or really tall, just accept the way you are. But the thing is with obesity is this is something that everyone can control, and it's not easy, but everyone loses weight when they're in a caloric deficit. Everyone gains weight when they're in a caloric surplus. It just, that's the way it works. And it's something you can influence. It's not a disease. And actually, I don't really like using the term disease for that. Same thing with like drug addiction and alcohol addiction. It's not really a disease. Cancer is a disease. Like, you got it, you can't get rid of it. It's there. It can kill you, but it's something you have to deal with. Like food addiction, alcohol addiction, this is something that you do to yourself. So, but I don't want to sound like I'm blaming people. I'm really, really not. This is a tough issue, but it's something we all struggle with. Like, we all love food. Most of us don't want to move. Like, even people that are into exercise like us, we got to make ourselves do it. Like, our inclination as humans is just to eat a bunch of crappy food and lay around and not do anything. That's what we're programmed to do.
Sounds like my Saturday.
Yeah, right, right. Exactly. But if you look at any hunter gatherer society, that's how, and all of us were hunter gatherers up until, about 30,000 years ago. That's what they do. They just kind of hang out, lay around, do stuff until it's time to eat, and they hunt something, kill it, gorge themselves, and wait for the next. That's just life. That's how it works. So we have these same patterns. So, falling victim to that it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. You're just doing what you're supposed to do. Now, the reason that this is a problem, especially in the US, one, we have so much food available. It's just everywhere. Like, I can't go to a gas station without being assaulted by the smell of like donuts and all this pizza and all this delicious food, you know, that I love.
Oh, there it is.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And not only that, culturally, it's very impolite not to engage in the festivities, which, that's a remnant of our past. I mean, basically, when someone offered you food in the Middle Ages, they didn't have a lot of food. Like, they were offering you something that was, very dear to them. And that's a big gesture. That's like, I'm offering my household my food. You better take it and be polite about it. Like in Iceland to this day, we have that culture. Like, if you go somewhere, they serve you food, you better eat it. Even if you're not hungry, it doesn't matter. In the US, it's kind of like, oh, no, thank you, whatever. But in a lot of these countries, you need to eat the food. But here, we kind of still have that culture a little bit. So, like, if you go to the office or something, there's donuts, there's pizza, there's stuff like that. Oh, it's so and so's birthday. Here are these cupcakes. And you're like, no, thank you. I'm trying to watch, what I'm eating. People are just like, what's wrong with this guy? What a jerk. So there's like this pressure to engage in these activities. And when you're trying to actually better yourself, you get so much negative feedback from people. It's very interesting. Like, well, oh, you're too good to eat this food. Oh, you don't like my cooking. It's like, oh, okay, you don't want to eat that. That's weird. So it's already very difficult to do what you're supposed to do. But when you add social pressure to not do the right thing on top of that, it's almost impossible. And I think that's one of the big reasons we're in the position we're in, is because of our culture. And I'll compare this to Iceland, which is very interesting because I had a very interesting kind of view of the last 20 years in Iceland. I basically have lived here since 2000. So I've been here in the US for 23 years. I've only visited. So I went to Iceland in 2003, 2004. Everyone was completely, normal, just skinny people basically. Um, I went there again in 2008, 2009, and everyone had gained weight. And I looked around like, what the hell just happened? Like, why did everyone get so big? And then I came back in 2012 and everyone was back to normal weight. And I was just like, hold on, what is happening here? So I talked to my uncle, a guy named Jonsi. He works at kind of a Lifetime in Iceland, like a big fancy gym like we used to work at. I work at
Yeah.
currently. But he was saying he's been a trainer now for over 30 years. And he was like, this is what happened. Everybody started basically adopting the American way of life, not moving, eating hamburgers, and everyone gained weight. And in 2008, we had the big crash, like the Great Recession. Iceland and Greece, I think, were hit the hardest. So our system almost completely collapsed, including our healthcare system. So, like to this day, like if you want to get a major treatment in Iceland, I mean, you might be put on a waiting list. They have a single payer system. So, I know a guy that had to wait 3.5 years to have heart surgery because he had supraventricular tachycardia. This is one of our best athletes. So, I mean, he had to have open heart surgery, but it was like 3 years he had to wait until before he got that. So, everyone knows this. So, everyone kind of thought at the same time, like, oh shit, I need to take control over my own health. So he said everyone started watching their diet. I think at that time they kicked McDonald's out. I'm not sure if the timeline matches up, but I like to think of it that way. And the culture changed. He said if you in an office in Iceland bring donuts to the office, people will ostracize you because the attitude is, hey, people might be trying to better themselves. What are you doing? Are you sabotaging them? So culturally, they shifted towards more of a, hey, we need to take care of ourselves attitude. And
Yeah.
in a very short amount of time, it solved the problem. Like I was in Iceland, a few weeks ago, and I just did not see a lot of obese people. I did not. I saw a few, but they were few and far between compared to over here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Like you go to an average
Mhm.
grocery store right here, it's everywhere. So it was very striking. But the key is what he said is people took personal responsibility for their health because they kind of had to. In the
Yeah.
US, the attitude is if you get sick, you get diabetes, you get high blood pressure, just go to the doctor. He'll take care of it. He'll give you shots, he'll give you pills, and you'll be fine. And the reality is, and I did spend some time in the medical industry fairly recently. I was an EMT for it was about a year and a half. And I saw this up close and personal, this sort of junk food, pharmaceutical, industrial complex. And it's terrible, actually. I mean, these people that I was picking up, I mean, some of them were like 5, 6, 7, 800 pounds.
Jesus.
The
That's a
medication list
PR.
they were on is like, yeah, I know. I think my PR was over 800. Transporting that guy that was an adventure, let me tell you. But when you look at, as an EMT, I have to do their chart, and I'd see their medication list and their health problems, and it was just a laundry list. I mean, these are people that are on 20 to 25 medications, and half of them are to counteract the side effects of the first round of medication. So it's just like it's ridiculous. But here's the thing: when I picked up older people, like I think my oldest patient that I picked up was about 109 years old. And I got a lot of people there in their 90s and hundreds. You looked at their medication chart. Guess what it looked like? Take a wild guess.
Very small.
Aspirin and laxative. Done. That's it. I'm picking up a 47-year-old, 600-pound guy that's on his last leg. Man, it's an alphabetical order. It's just like a laundry list. So it's like where people honestly believe that they can just do whatever they want, treat their bodies like a garbage can, and then they just go to the hospital and they fix everything. They literally have that attitude, and it just isn't the case. We can't fix it.
Yeah, and I fall into the stance of I view obesity as a choice. I think you bring up a lot of valid points, and there's always factors in everything, but ultimately, you've got the you've got a choice in whatever you do, how you spend your time, how you allocate your efforts, and things like that. I think there are a couple things at play, and initially when I made the argument, I was like, "Oh, this is 100% a choice." A lot of times, with you look at the personal accountability thing, sometimes it's hard to look yourself in the mirror and be like,
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
being kind of lazy here.
Absolutely.
I think our industry lately, it kind of feels a little bit like we're like the outsiders, like in this, and obviously we're by far in the minority. But when you look at what the fitness street is right now from a what's the word? Of how it's marketed and all that stuff. It's like fun. It's this athletic thing, this athletic environment where everyone has abs, everyone has a six pack, all the guys are jacked. You don't see that so much when you look at like body positivity, where I think that's like we want everyone to be comfortable in their own skin, right? If you're someone
Right.
and you're completely happy, like that's great. If you're someone who's obese and you're complaining about it or you're worried about your health, then it becomes a different then you fall into a different category. But if you're good and happy, like by all means, like you're probably not listening to this podcast anyway.
Right.
Like by all means, do your thing. If you want to shorten your lifespan by 30 years, go for it, brother. But if you have some kind of concern for it, then you like it's not I don't view it as a great thing to with the body positivity. Like you should no one should be an asshole, right? And shit on other people for how they look. That's just a horrible thing to do.
I agree. I agree.
And when you see like the changes, like our obesity stats are getting worse, and then you look at advertisements, you have Gatorade with obese models, you have Calvin Klein with obesity models going there,
Yeah, I saw
and
that.
you, like the list goes on, and then you contrast that with what the fitness stuff is, and it's the other extreme of it, where it's like everyone's jacked, everyone's shredded, everyone has abs, everyone looks like a superhero, and this is like the way, and it's like those two extremes are both hard to get to, like to be incredibly obese and to also be incredibly fit. Like even for us in our own industry, you know what I mean? Like a lot of us, a lot of times of the year, we have this fluctuation, and me and you have talked about it a lot. We have this fluctuation between like, okay, we look kind of shredded, and then we kind of don't, kind of chilling, and we kind of get that reset going. And I think that kind of puts it in a situation where it's like we almost paint the dream too much, and then people have this idea where I'm going to start the gym 2 weeks in, I'm gonna look like Ryan Reynolds. I'm gonna be playing in a Marvel movie or bust. Where realistically you just need to kind of create the habit. And I think a lot of that is on us. And when you look at our industry and you look on social media about any fitness trainer, it's all the same shit. It's like 90% misinformation, to use a funny
Mhm.
word that floats around a lot lately. No one's actually posting what they're actually doing. And you see all that, and like I think it just leads people down a dark road, which ultimately makes the concept of a like when we look at the injections with Ozempic and some of the other agonists, GLP-1 agonists, like it makes it very appealing.
Right. Well, the first thing I want to address the Ozempic, the semaglutides. I am overall pretty like positive about it, but there are definitely some negatives. So Ozempic has shown that the problem for almost all people is their inability to control cravings. Because when you do consultation, people will tell you all this nonsense like, oh, I only eat like chicken breasts and broccoli and whatever, whatever. My metabolism is just slow. I just genetically this, and that. Yeah, you know what? Everyone that I've seen that's taken the semaglutides, they all lose weight. And the only thing these semaglutides do is they block the ghrelin receptors in your brain. So that's the hunger hormone. So you never really get that signal that you're hungry. And what we're seeing with a lot of people that are taking Ozempic, and I see this at Lifetime actually, there's some people on staff that are on it, is they're not eating enough. So they're not getting
Yeah.
this hunger signal. So they're going the opposite direction where they're getting less than 30 grams of protein a day and like 1,000 calories, but they don't feel bad. So the problem with using that drug therapy is like if you didn't have the discipline to do what you were supposed to before, you're probably not going to have the discipline on the other end where if you don't feel hungry, you still need to make sure you need to get the baseline of nutrition you need to be a healthy human being. And a lot of people are ending up with like sarcopenia, osteoporosis because of this, because they're just not getting the basic building blocks of their body that they need as a human being. So that is one problem. But again, Ozempic kind of called people's bullshit on that. It's like, no, the problem isn't your genetics. The problem isn't all that. The problem is you have a hard time regulating your behavior due to your appetite. And
Yes.
that's a good thing. I mean, I think it's like okay, we all have this problem. Like I've gotten very very lean before. You have too. You feel hungry, and your body, and they've shown this in studies that your brain chemistry actually changes. Like the signals change if you get hungry, and it affects your impulse control. I mean, it's hard to do. Like for me, if I'm going to stay lean year round, which I generally do, mainly, I like doing it, and also because of my job. Again, I'm in the fitness industry. There's a certain look people are looking for. I have to be really, really organized. I need to have my meals prepared. I need to have them close by. I need to make sure that I go to grocery stores not starving. Because they've shown that like if you go to the grocery store full versus if you're on an empty stomach, you end up buying different things. You make different choices because literally your brain has rewired itself in a way to make sure you get more calories. So, these are things that you have to know as a human being. You have this problem and you have to organize your life around that. So, which does take some discipline. So, but Ozempic, I think overall could be a pretty positive thing, but I think they're already overprescribing it. Like I've heard of people weighing 120 pounds wanting to lose that extra 5 pounds, and the doc's like, "Oh yeah, here's a shot every week. Have at it." It's like, no, no, no. That's when I'm looking at semaglutides, I'm looking more like at a 300-pound person that's having some health problems, and it's like, okay, and they've tried everything, and they just have a really tough time regulating their behavior. Someone like that, I think, is a really good candidate for that. And I'm not going to down that because there are some drug therapies that work very well. And another thing with the semaglutides is diabetics have been taking this medication now for over 10 years, like a lot of them, to the point actually now that they're having trouble getting their hands on it because all the weight loss people are just drying up the supply just immediately.
Which is hilarious and
It is
also
kind of
fucked
funny.
up. Yeah, like, you got your diabetic medicine on back order, like
Do you know why that is? So diabetics, of course, get this medication covered by insurance, and insurance in America never pays the whole ticket price. So they pay at maximum about 45%. So it's anywhere between 25 and 45%. So if you get like $1,000 medication or bill or whatever, insurance covers it. The insurance bids on it and say, "Hey, you're bidding 10 grand, but I'll pay you 3,500." And a lot of times the providers say yes. So when you're selling semaglutides to diabetics, you're only getting maybe half of what somebody paying cash would get for. So all these weight loss people are paying cash, so they're getting all the actual medication because they pay more for it. You know what I mean? So it's kind of it's kind of not a great system when it comes to that because some diabetics do really well with this medication. It helps them. Like it manages their blood sugar and actually helps them lose weight at the same time. It's actually pretty great. But because we have so many people using this drug over a long period of time, we have a pretty good idea of what it does, and it doesn't have a lot of negative side effects. Because I don't know if you remember a lot of the weight loss drugs in the past, like fen and stuff. That was a big one. There was a big federal lawsuit due to that one. People were really, really harmed. Like they did a lot of damage to their bodies. I think fen did cardiovascular like damage or something. I can't quite remember the details, but it was bad enough where people got like compensated pretty well for that. So, and this is kind of the history of that. And one of the main weight loss drugs they used before Zempic is basically an amphetamine. I think it's phentermine or something like that. So basically, amphetamines are an appetite suppressant, but amphetamine abuse and heart disease is very clearly linked. Like it is very bad for you. So these other options, and of course, then you have gastric bypass, which has a lot of complications. I am not a fan of gastric. But with this shot with Ozempic, we're getting gastric bypass results without mutilating people's digestive system. So I'm not one of those that's off the gate saying, okay, no, Ozempic is bad. No, for a lot of people, this might be the magic solution. But for a lot of people that are looking for, again, maybe the last 20 pounds, you're not 200 pounds overweight, you're 20 pounds, you want to get that look. Taking that drug, I don't recommend it. I really don't recommend it. That is not, and because I've heard a lot of like meatheads talk about it, it's like, bro, I'm gonna cut for the summer. I need to get my hand on these semaglutides, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. Like in your case, that might be counterproductive, dude. But for a lot of people that are struggling, that are having serious health problems, if this gets their weight down, so be it. So be it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So here's my thing. So you brought up one of the concerns. Obviously, you're not going to be eating as much and where that's usually going to
It's
be.
difficult to eat actually on it.
Yeah, you're going to be missing out a lot of protein, right? So you run the risk of losing bone density, losing muscle mass, right? So looking at like what you do and stuff like that, and like what are some ways you can offset some of that loss?
That's a good question. So one of the things, strength training, strength training, strength training. If you want to maintain your muscle mass and your bone density, you got to lift weights. That's just it's not even a question anymore. Another thing is like if you are going to take this drug to lose weight, okay, we need to make sure that you're at least tracking your protein intake throughout the day. Maybe not everything, but we're going to have like a target for your protein. You need to meet that. And as long as you do that, I think it's going to be fine. But that's the main thing. But a lot of people, what they do is they eat salad and hop on the treadmill, of course, and they
Mhm.
end up they're calling it Ozempic face. they end up like really kind of the cheeks sunken in, kind of, that look, whatever. And
Dude,
it's
that's
because they're starving to death. I mean,
the other reason for that. And again, I don't know why I end up knowing a lot about plastic surgery procedures. One of the biggest plastic surgery one of the more popular ones that's trending is they take out the buccal fat in their face. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Seen that. I've seen that. I don't like it.
yeah, as you age anyway, like you're gonna lose your cheek fat and they get sunken in and you get more of that like, you've seen some shit look in your face. But younger folks are starting to do that. So you're starting to see that progress
Dude,
like
I've
a lot
seen that. That
earlier.
was like before, like that one chick that was in the Queen's Gambit. One of the really big eyes that are set far apart. Like,
Anya Taylor Joy.
yeah, her. She had that done. It was a before and after, and it was just like, oh wow, now you look like an alien skull. Like you just look weird. I don't like it. Because before, she had that little bit of baby fat. It looked good. I mean, she's a pretty girl, but she's kind of interesting looking. But the sunken in cheeks, it's just like, ooh, yeah, that's I don't like it. You need to put it back. Like, that's just no good. But yeah, people are actually giving themselves that look, and it's basically a sign that you are starving. Like if your body is metabolizing your face fat, I mean, you're really in a really heavy deficit at that point. Like that, and that is not good for you. Starving is not good for you. So, same thing with being obese. I mean, that's not good for you either. You got to find that medium. Like too much and too little is both bad.
Yeah. So when we look at, so you mentioned, strength training, right? We can help offset that. Obviously, everyone should be strength training for that reason, even if you're not on Ozempic, right? What we know about humans is as we age, we lose bone density and muscle mass regardless. So we want to offset that as much as possible. Like, so from your viewpoint on training and strength training, like, how would you approach it with the beginner as far as like starting that as someone who's just like, hey, I'm just getting started out. I'd like to get stronger. Like, what does that look like? And what are some ways that you've seen that help people get strong pretty fast or effectively, I should say?
Yeah. So it depends on who you're talking to and what their goals are. So I always have this kind of it's like a split between wanting to look good naked and not wanting to die. So it happens usually around about 50. So everyone under 50, they're more concerned about what they look like in their bathing suit. After that, it's like, look, I don't want to like croak. So the approach with those two different scenarios is pretty different. So most of my clients, for example, are more in the I don't want to die category, but obviously I do both. It's something you want to get leaner, you want to get healthier. One thing is, and this is a eureka moment for a lot of people, those are not mutually exclusive goals. Those are the same thing. So, wanting to maintain your health, wanting to look better, and wanting to function better is all the same path. And when people realize that, that changes the conversation a little bit because a lot of people have this idea that weight training is somehow bad for you and being more muscular is somehow unhealthy when the exact opposite is true. So that's one thing. It's like once you get people to understand that, that's a big deal. And another thing is when you get them to understand how little time is needed to actually get to that place. That's another thing. Because when you ask people, for example, if you look at a pro bodybuilder, somebody like Dorian Yates, for example, he is a very, very interesting guy. He was Mr. Olympia 4 times back in the 90s, British guy. He's been on Joe Rogan and a few other podcasts. He's a real smart guy, real interesting, and he was a pretty big pioneer. But anyway, so he was the first real like mass monster in bodybuilding. Like everyone before him kind of looked like Arnold, and this guy came out looking like just like granite. He looked like Ronnie Coleman in his heyday. And Rogan asked him at one point, "It's like, dude, you must have been in the gym like 2 hours a day, 6 days a week." And Yates was like, "Nope, 3 sessions a week, 45 minutes. That's it." Of course, Rogan's like,
Insane.
"Bullshit, there's no way." And he was like, and then Yates was like, "Okay, I've been a trainer for like 25 years, and people tell me that all the time. And what I do is I tell them, okay, come in and I'll take you through those 45 minutes. And if you feel like you need to do more work, we'll do more work." And he said about 20 minutes in, everyone quits because those 45 minutes he was training were the 45 minutes from hell. It was just like drop set, 4 sets. It was nasty, nasty, nasty. But because he kept that intensity really high, he could keep the frequency really low. So for most people, yeah, they do come to the gym every day to try to get in shape, but their intensity is so low, nothing's happening. And the body doesn't care how much time you spend in the gym. It just doesn't care. Like what is concerned with is what kind of stimuli are you creating and are you allowing your body to recover from that? And for most people, a couple of full body strength training sessions a week is plenty. Like 2 hours a week, that's it. That's enough if you do it correctly and if you do it intense enough. So that actually really encourages people too, because people's idea of what it takes, like you were saying earlier, the expectation the fitness industry has on people, it's just completely unrealistic. So it's just like, oh, you come in like 6 7 days a week for 2 hours, and you're going to look like fucking Arnold in like 6 months. Like, no, that's not realistic. However, what it takes to actually get in shape is a lot less what people actually think. And I always tell people my goal with most of my clients is to find the minimum effective dose of exercise to get where they want to go.
Yep.
And where you want to go, it just depends. So some people just want to be normal weight, want to be healthier. Okay, that's actually not a huge time and energy commitment, not really. And that's what most people are looking for. Now, if you want to like win the neighborhood pool contest or whatever, then yeah, you're going to have to get leaner, and there's more time and energy invested in that process. But for what most people are looking for, their goal is a lot less than what they think it is. And for a lot of people, it's very encouraging. A lot of times they think I'm full of shit. Like I tell them that, and they're like, "Nah, that can't be right." So, but
Yeah.
it's actually true. And the formula for most people to get in shape is pretty simple: is you do a full body strength training session. And when I mean full body, I mean free weights. I mean movement based. So you're doing your squats, you're doing your presses and pulls and presses, and all these basic human movements. Do a pretty intense workout with those movements. Make sure you get plenty of steps every day. Make sure you get plenty of protein and high quality protein. And for most people, if they do that, man, the fat just drops off of them. And they're usually surprised like that's happening because they just assumed it was going to be more difficult than it, more painful than it isn't. So a lot of people talk themselves out of getting into shape before they even start because they think it's going to be a lot worse than it actually is. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Oh no,
We
that
don't we
makes
don't
perfect
sell
sense.
that in the fitness industry at all. We just sell get in shape in 60 days, get, stuff like that.
Good old 60 days.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. The literal worst way to lose weight possible.
Yeah. So we're talking about we're doing strength training and stuff like that. Something that's been circulating that's kind of had my attention, um, and getting your take on it because we're talking about the fitness industry selling this. Hey, here's the extreme. Like everyone's fucking shredded. You also see this in Hollywood a lot, and there's a
Oh yeah.
specific conversation in Hollywood that actually Joe Rogan and Derek from More Plates More Dates kind of kicked off
I
with.
think I saw that the outtake. I know what you're talking about.
They were talking about when he had him on his podcast. They were talking about different actors and whether they've are they on steroids, are they not on steroids, um, and one that's come under, I don't want to say investigation, but the question's been asked where they're usually not asked, was Hugh Jackman. So Hugh Jackman is going to play Wolverine again in Deadpool. Hugh
Which is
Jackman's
amazing. Isn't he like 60 now or something?
he's 57.
Like he's close. What? That's crazy.
Yeah, so they're talking. So, and mind you, like Hugh Jackman, love the guy, talented actor, love his character. I think he's been one of the best superheroes, castings of all time. I love all his movies. So they showed that they had asked him, "Hey, are you going to be?" He's bulking up to become Wolverine again because obviously he hasn't been Wolverine in I think it's like 8 years.
Right.
Um, and they're like, "Oh, like what are you doing to like get ready and things like that? And like how's that going? Like, are you taking anything because of your age?" And he's like, "Nope, I just have an 8,000 calorie diet that is making me bulk, and at the end of which I'll be shredded." And a lot of people are raising an eyebrow saying like, "Hey,
Hmm.
that doesn't quite add up because if you end up with looking like how Wolverine looks, you would have to burn off 8,000 calories because you get where I'm going
Right.
with that." So
Right.
what's kind of like your take on it? Because I know personally, when I'm fully in my workout program and let's say I'm trying to get bigger, I come in around somewhere between 35 and 4,000 calories, and all that's only because I'm running and I'm trying to eat to offset a lot of the running there. I know you're much larger than I am. What's your calorie intake in a day?
So it depends on what I'm doing. I do the traditional meathead, bulk up in the wintertime and then cut in the summertime kind of deal.
Which feels
So
right.
bulk and pop, bulk. Yeah, I mean it shifts your goals. It keeps you interested. It's like because you gotta get tired of doing the same thing all the time. So plus in the wintertime, nobody sees you with your shirt off except your wife anyway, and she doesn't care. So, but it's it's fun to be at the beach all shredded. But I'm like when I'm really really lean. Like I'm not Hugh Jackman level, but I can get pretty close. I'm doing about 2,000 calories a day. And I have a job where I'm on my feet all day long. I get at least 10,000 steps a day. I'm moving barbells. I'm moving, kettlebells. Moving plates all day long. And I'm running about 2,000 calories a day. Of course, that's a pretty big deficit. In the wintertime, when I'm getting ready for powerlifting competition, stuff like that, I'm trying to put on some muscle mass. Like in the summertime, I get down to about 210, 215. And the wintertime, I'll get as high. I've been as high as 270, but that was really uncomfortable. I never want to do that again. That was just awful. I just, it was like I had to hold my breath to tie my shoes. I felt like I had to poop all the time. It was the worst, man. It was awful. But I usually about 245, 250 is where I get to. And then I'm doing about 4,500, 5,000 calories. Now, I don't know what specifically Hugh Jackman is doing. If the dude is working out like all day long, yeah, maybe that makes sense. But literally, I mean, if he's doing like 5, 6 hours of exercise every day, okay, maybe he needs that many calories. But dudes always exaggerate stuff, man. You always tell people the fish is bigger than it is. Like that's pretty common, you know. I mean, what is he actually doing? Is he actually doing 8K? I doubt it. Like if you actually put that in a food calculator and start, breaking that down, how much food that is. Like I was actually going to do it before this podcast, but I forgot. Like how much steak and rice and stuff you need to eat to do that. But it's possible, but I find it unlikely to be quite honest. Another controversy is, of course, that we're talking about, hey, do you use drugs? And he's like, no, absolutely not. And it's like, yeah, so you're significantly more muscular and leaner than you were in the first X-Men, what, 23 years ago? So, and that was
Yeah.
in his 50s. So it's just like, I'm not going to accuse the man of taking controlled substances, but you also got to figure he's an Australian. That stuff is very, very illegal over there and frowned upon. Sylvester Stallone got busted up there a few years ago, and he caught a charge down there. He had like a bunch of testosterone and growth hormone in his luggage, and they busted it. He
Yeah.
he ended up coming on TV and saying, "It's a fountain of youth. I love it. Yeah, I did it." He admitted to all of it. So,
I don't know why, like, I would understand why, like, an actor or not an actor, like, an athlete in a, uh, regulated sport, what might but if you're an actor, like, it actually I think it actually adds to your credibility, like, obviously, you still gotta work if you're on stuff,
oh yeah, of course.
um, but, like, I don't see why they're not just like, "Yeah, here's what I do."
I think the problem is what he's doing. If he's actually using drugs for physique reasons, that's a crime in his native country of Australia. So basically, if he admits to it, he admits to basically using a controlled substance, and that could potentially be a problem. So for him not to admit it, I get that, and I don't know what the laws are on like anti-aging stuff. I mean, each country is a little bit different. Like in Iceland, for example, I have a lot of my buddies that want to go that route, but they don't because it just isn't really, the system isn't friendly toward that. But then you come to the States, and there's some states that are like really friendly towards anti-aging stuff. And when we say anti-aging, we're talking about testosterone therapy, human growth hormone, bunch of other, gray area drugs that people use to, become Tom Cruise basically. So, and there are some, I mean, it's debatable whether it works or not, but I gotta say, I know older dudes that have gone that route, and they look fucking incredible. Like 70 years old, just jacked with veins everywhere. So I'm all like, he seems to be doing okay. You
Yeah,
know, as long as I think it's monitored by a physician and you're doing blood work and you're doing what you're supposed to and it's legal, I think it's a great thing to do. But I think for Hugh Jackman, his environment where he is, where he lives in Australia, I think it might be a big problem. So he literally can't admit to it. So I don't, I don't blame
that's
him
fair.
there. But do I suspect that he's doing it? Oh, hell yeah. Look at him. He's like 60 and he's jacked to the nines. And good for him. Good for him. I hope he's happy.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The other thing too, like, to put this in perspective, like the 8,000 calorie thing as well, because that obviously 8,000 is both, higher than both of if you were to combine our days.
Oh, I'd throw up if I
Um,
ate 8,000 calories. I couldn't stomach it.
yeah, also, if you're eating that much, like, you're gonna have to burn that much. I'm trying to think, s there are times where I've run about somewhere between a half marathon and 16 miles in a day, and also done a workout, and also got, like, 17,000 steps, and I burned, like, 3,700 calories with probably 10% error there on the calculation.
It's probably more than that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in my head, I'm like, the amount of time that you'd have to spend like working, like to burn 10,000, like that 8,000
Right.
calories even is
Right.
insane. Like, you would need help.
So, like for him, it seems like, and I know guys have done this, that do all this work and fuel all this work, and it's unnecessary. It's like if you would just like eat less and not work out quite as much, you'd kind of be in the same place, and you probably your joints would feel better. Because I know guys that do that, that just do like tons of work, man. They're taking in 4, 5, 600 grams of carbs, and they're shredded because they're burning all that. And I'm all like, if you like didn't do all that work and just ate less, you'd probably have the same physique, dude. Just saying, but like it might be one of those situations. But the guy also just might like working out a lot. I mean, that might be just his thing. He loves beating the crap out of himself, and if that's the case. That's great. I mean, he's
Yeah.
a super rich actor. What else is he going to do all day? Like, so it's might as well just work out, right? Sounds like the life to me.
Yeah. Oh, I would love that.
Oh, absolutely.
So have you played with ChatGPT yet?
I have yet to play with that device, but I've heard a lot of people talk about it. So it's on my to do list.
Yeah. While we've been sitting here talking, I've been pulling it up. So I use ChatGPT all the time. I like to use it just to make things concise. I actually don't use it for what we're about to talk about. I don't use it for programming or anything like that. However, a lot of people have been using it for programming. If you look at a lot of the programming that's available, we talked about this the other day. When you look at a lot of programming that's available online, it's very cookie cutter, very copy paste. It's nothing specific. So, kind of like the old school guys like us, we're not going to be replaced by AI. But a lot of that online cookie cutter stuff, you can definitely make it happen, right?
Absolutely.
So you're a powerlifting coach. You've had athletes that compete. You've competed yourself. So I want to hear your take on this concept entirely. So I just typed in to ChatGPT. I was like, I'm looking to become a powerlifting competitor. Write me a 2-day workout plan. I just chose a random kind of thing just to see what it would say really quickly. So it's like, sure, here's something super simple. And it's day one, squat and bench focus. So squat 5x5, bench 5x5, barbell row 4x8, lunges 3x10, shoulder press 3x10, and some core training. It loves core. It loves saying to do planks.
I'm sure it does.
Then you got deadlift focus, 5x5, incline dumbbell bench 4x8, pull ups 4 by AMRAP leg curls, dumbbell bicep curls, core training again, more planks.
Yeah, that's kind of a salad right there, a little bit. Like I wouldn't write it that way. It's got the right idea, and I think it's going to get very good very quickly. Because essentially, what all powerlifting coaches do is we all go by templates and percentages. Honestly,
Yeah.
it's just a thing. And actually, most programming is basically you're plugging in numbers into a template, and you're making sure people adhere to it properly. There is some variability you can put in there, especially when people have specific weaknesses you want to address. Like if you have a powerlifter and he's a bencher and his lockout sucks, obviously you want to do more tricep work, or maybe work on his forearm. There might be a technical issue there. But I think for competitive stuff, Chat GPT is still a little bit far away, because when you're getting ready for a competition, it's a very day by day kind of thing. So I actually hired a coach a couple years ago to help me, a guy named Marty Gallagher, and he's a legendary guy, real legendary guy. He trained Eddie Cohn and Kurt Kowalski back in the day, Doug Furness, a lot of the legends back in the 80s and 90s. And he basically just he didn't even do anything on the spreadsheet at all. He didn't give a shit about that. It was an hour-long phone call on the weekends where I told him what I did, how it felt, and he gave me suggestions for the next week. And basically it was interesting, because I asked him about this. I was like, so all the basically the powerlifting peaking cycles are based on your work. They kind of reverse engineered what Ed Cohn and Kurt Kowalski did and put it in a percentage. And I was kind of asking him about it, and he just laughed. He was like, I'm a country boy, I don't deal with numbers, that's too complicated for me.
Mhm.
So what he'd do basically is, he'd look maybe 12 weeks away, um, have a goal for the meet, and just work backwards. And a lot of this stuff was optional. He was like, only the freakiest of the freaks could do their prescribed rep range and weights every week. Like when he was like, when you're looking at Ed Cohn's stuff, you're looking at one of the top athletes in that sport of all time during his best meet prep, where he didn't miss a lift. A real person never, ever, ever does that. I've never done a meet prep where everything went perfectly. So it's a lot of just problem solving. You have a template, you have it in there, and then you just kind of problem solve. He even blew my mind with assistance work. He told me, he's like, look, man, you have the main barbell lift, you have assistance work, and if you feel tired or it's not going too well, just stop. It's fine. You don't need to do it. The same thing with the barbell lift. Say if you have a target of 300 pounds for that day for a set of five, just as an example. And man, if you get to your last warm up set and it's like 250 and it feels heavy, just do that. That's fine. So I'm like, I've always done it where you have a plan and you either do the plan or you fucking die. That's it. And he was like, no, 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 we never did it that way. And that's why his guys lasted a long time. I mean, Eddie Cohn had like a 20-year career and he was on top of pretty much top of the heap the whole time. Same thing with Kurt Kowalski, and they're still pretty healthy. I mean, I've met Ed Cohn a couple times. He's pretty beat up, but like he's moving around. He's fine. So the problem with Chat GPT is not going to really get that nuance right away. Like I didn't get that nuance at all, and I've been coaching powerlifters for many, many years. I've been in the sport for 20 years, and I didn't really get that. Like I was like, whoa, that's kind of a revelation to me. So
Yeah.
that being said, the cookie cutter, just get in shape people, Chat GPT is very quickly going to overtake the online people and do a better job. And the simple reason is most of these online people just throw templates out. That's all they do. They have different templates. They plug in there. It's nothing special. They answer your questions about stuff. They send you videos. That's it. It's not very complicated. And the fact that the selling point on online training is you can handle a higher volume is indicative of the low quality of the service. So yeah, you can handle a couple hundred clients, but like as a trainer one-on-one, I can't handle anywhere near that because I have to invest more time and energy into that person. So the service I provide is higher quality. And the in-person stuff I don't think is ever going to be taken by AI because what is a robot going to spot you? And also, like, you're not accountable to a robot. It's like, I don't want to disappoint the robot today. I better come in. No, it doesn't matter. So, the actual, like, me, what I do for a living as a personal trainer, I'm not very threatened by this. But the people that have like, kind of leveraged all their business online to do this online stuff, I think they're going to get screwed pretty quickly. They put all their eggs in the wrong basket, in my opinion. And another thing is with online training, while I'm shitting on that, for example, let's say you're playing tennis and your tennis game sucks and you want to hire a professional. What do? Are you going to hire a in-person coach to help you with it? Or are you going to get a guy that's going to send you emails? Of course, you're going to get the guy that's in person. Like you can't learn tennis from an email. Same thing with traditional sports, baseball, soccer. Your kid's sucking at soccer. You're not going to send a guy email so you can get a spreadsheet. You want someone in person because there is value to that, and the online training is missing that. And that's especially relevant for new people because there are so many things, especially when it comes to strength training and barbell training, you have to learn, and you have to learn in person that you just can't do from a distance. So I've been adverse to the whole thing, but lately, and I've seen, people that have had coaches, and I've actually tried it a few times, and it just, the service of, the quality of the service just wasn't where it needed to be to get the job done. I think people are being sold on a premise that just isn't, it's not reasonable. So, but that being said, experienced people like myself, for example, I've been a competitive powerlifter for 20 years right now. So if I hire an online coach for powerlifting, that's going to work for me because I already know how to do the lifts. Like, if I have errors, then the lifts are going to be very few. So it's something I can take, I can take an email criticism or a phone call criticism and apply it because, I'm an elite level strength athlete. You see what I mean? But somebody that has never gone into the weight room before, you just throw them a template or give them a piece of paper, they're going to fail. And we're promising that these online things are actually going to make a difference for people like that. And I think it's a false promise, honestly.
Oh,
I say that a
100%.
great professional, because my company obviously is involved in this, but this is a position, that's a hill I'm willing to die on, honestly. Because in the end, I help people. That's what I do. That's why I do this. Like I could do other things where I'd make a lot more money than personal training, but I stay in this industry because I feel like I really can make a difference in people's lives. I can help them. And when I see something in the industry, I feel like is giving people a false sense of hope. I can't help but speak out against it, even though my own company that pays my salary is pushing this whole thing. I think it's just the wrong direction. So, if I get fired, that's you know why.
I don't think, I think your company's got
Yeah, I don't think they're
other
going to
fish
watch
to
this
fry.
podcast probably, but they might. You never know. You never know.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like a cash grab, the whole online industry.
It is.
Sometimes I've only really had good luck with like one coach who was kind of in a mentor role and um, a running coach, which actually worked really well because that was a lot. I mean, you're not going to come running with me. Great coach. He had a great system. It
Right.
worked. Like
And,
period.
and that's the thing with running is it's a lot less technical than weight training. And it's one of those things. Yeah, you can do pretty well with that because if you're the biggest problem you have is basically how to set up the training protocol, then yes, online training can be valuable. But when we're talking strength training, especially general population that has a lot of let's just call it movement dysfunction. Um, Addressing that is quite a job. Actually, you know this. I mean, you had quite a few clients, especially office workers. Shoulders don't do anything. Everything behind them just doesn't work. Their glutes do nothing. Their hamstrings do nothing. And you just throw them a piece of paper and tell them to do stuff. Like it's not going to work. I mean, I've had people where it took them 2 or 3 months just to be able to do a halfway decent just body weight squat. And that took a
Hmm.
lot of work, a lot of different cues, addressing a lot of problems. And the online format just isn't appropriate for that. And unfortunately, most of the US population falls in that category. You don't see a lot of people that have normal movement patterns anymore. And it starts early. I mean, I'm seeing kids like 11, 12 years old that are already, they have like 40-year-old office worker problems. It's
Well, that's
crazy.
Fortnite. That's
Yeah,
Fortnite right
and the,
there,
the
and
phones.
Call
I
of
mean, they're
Duty.
just they're
Yep.
just here. The whole lives are doing that, and they end up just a mess. So this is a pretty big deal, and this is not going to be addressed with online format. It's just not.
Yep. So you've got something cool going on, a little competition lately. So
Oh yeah,
I'm a big proponent of competition. The reason I like competition so much is because for the vast majority of us, we're not elite athletes going to, professional sports leagues. So competition for us ends, when we're like 22, 23, and then we get a different kind. But like the physical or activity based competition is kind of cool. So I had no idea what the Highland Games were until you started posting about it, over various times over the last year. And I see you, very large man, got the Viking heritage to you. You're out there in a kilt with a pitchfork, like
yeah.
throwing shit around. Like, talk to me about talk to me about that. Like, how'd you get into that, and like, what is it actually? Because
it's
you were telling me the other day.
Yeah, so it's a very old sport. So the Highland Games in their current form have been, like in the official form right now, have been around for about 200 years and has changed very little. So it's a Scottish sport, and the origins are basically the Scots were always subjugated by the British, and it was pretty much not legal to train like your warriors or whatever. So they disguise a lot of their training as just like competitions and farm work, and this is how they do their physical training. And a lot of these events that we do are kind of weapons, like the hammer throw, for example. That's a weapon. Some of them are the origin isn't quite clear, but these are events that have been around for 1,000 years or more. My brother Thor did the Scotland circuit, I think 2017 or 2018, the big circuit. And the culmination of that is a competition in Braemar in Scotland, where the Queen and the Prince Charles would always officiate that and shake hands with the athletes and stuff. Really cool stuff. So it's a big deal over there. And of course, in the U.S., there's a big, especially in the South, there's a big Scottish heritage thing there. So I've heard that North Carolina has more people of Scottish descent than Scotland does. So they hold this meeting over
Really?
here. Yeah, yeah. If you go up in the mountains, especially, there's always like McDougal's, McDonald's, McClanagan's up there. It's very Scottish up there. And when you go in the mountains, most people are familiar with the games. They know what they are. So if like
Huh.
you're up in Boone, you're up in Asheville and stuff like that, they know exactly what the Highland Games are. So it's a big part of the culture up there as well. And it's 7 events, sometimes 9, depending on the competition. So you have the stone putt, like if you ever seen Braveheart, when Braveheart came home and he was throwing the rocks. You have the open stone where you throw the rock, and then there's the Braemar stone, and that's a bigger stone that you throw standing. You can't spin around or glide or anything. You have the weight throws. So there are 2 weights. They're either 28 pounds or 56 pounds. There's a heavy and a lightweight. They're actually measured in stones, which is an old way of measuring things. 14 pounds is 1 stone. You still see that in England sometimes when people talk about their weight, how many stone they weigh. Like, oh, I weigh 10 stone. That means they weigh 140 pounds. So
So someone hit me with that one day. Like I was talking to someone, I think on a consultation, and like it just didn't register with me at first, and I was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
What is
Like,
stone? Like, what the hell is that?
the what?
Yeah, I think it's primarily used for body weight now in England. I don't think they use it for much else. But in the Highland Games, the weights are based on stone. So you have a 2 stone, 3 stone, and 4 stone weight. So you throw those for distance. You're basically in a big square with a toe board. You grab the weight with one hand, spin around, and throw it as far as you can. Sounds hard. It's even harder than it sounds. There's a weight over bar where you take that 56-pound weight, you throw it overhead over a standard. The sheaf toss, that's the pitchfork one. You actually got to try that at my house last week.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. That was pretty badass.
Yeah, that one's fun. That's the most user friendly one. That's the one you can actually do. Usually, when people come in and they grab the 56-pound weight with one hand, it's like, okay, throw it over your head. They're like, no, I don't, I don't think I want to do that at all. But then you have that's the sheaf toss. So you have a pitchfork, you have a 16 or 20-pound kind of bale of hay, and you use the pitchfork to fling it over a standard for height. So highest height wins. You have the hammer toss, which is you have a either I think it's a 16 or no, it's a 16 or 22-pound ball of steel on a stick. A lot of guys wear, and I do this as well, wear shoes that have big daggers on them. So you actually stab the ground to ground yourself with the ground because a lot of these guys are so big and they can wind the hammer up so much they can actually lift them off the ground. So you
Wow.
spin it around and throw it for distance. And the grand finale, most people are familiar with this one. If you talk about the Highland Games, you've probably seen this, is the caber toss. So the caber is a tree, essentially. It's anywhere from 17 to 25 feet tall. It can weigh anywhere from 90 to 250 pounds. And they kind of lift the tree up and put it on your shoulder. You lift it up, balance it, run forward with it, and then you try to flip it all the way over. You throw the tree. So this is the crowd pleaser. It's also the most dangerous of the events. That tree can really do a lot of damage.
So you're talking about almost like a telephone pole then.
Well, a telephone pole is like that thick. A caber is more like that. So it's the bigger ones are more like that. But it kind of looks like a big telephone pole actually when you see people
Yeah.
throw it. So it looks really difficult and it's even harder than that. So this being a septathlon with pretty unique events is pretty hard, and it's also the weights are so heavy. Like if you look at track and field, a lot of the implements they use, the spears, the discus, the shot, are pretty light. But in the Highland Games, you're handling things that are very, very heavy. You need a base level of strength. So the Highland Games here in North Carolina actually have been going on for a while. The Grandfather Mountain Highland Games, which actually I'm doing this year, have been around for almost 80 years. So this is actually a very big part of North Carolina culture. So, and for us, Icelanders, when I say us, we have a long history with the Scots. So there have been Icelanders competing in Scotland in the Highland Games for many centuries, actually. So, we have that relationship. So for me and my brother, obviously as Icelanders is something we want to get into. And the way we got into it is pretty interesting. This is before social media. We both started in 2006. We went on online forums, those old strength forums where people kept their training logs and stuff before social media. And we learned about it and we made implements out of PVC pipe and concrete just to practice. And we started doing it. Thor actually has done it. He's been more serious about it than I have. He's actually debuting as a pro this year at the Grandfather Mountain Highland Games, which is a very big deal. I
That's
only
awesome.
recently started really putting a lot of effort into it because Highland Games for me was like a cool thing to do in the off season, because my main thing was always powerlifting. But now that I'm in my 40s, powerlifting is starting to hurt a lot. So it's starting to get really uncomfortable. And on top of that, I'm looking at a lot of my peers. I'm kind of the only one left. Everyone else is retired, injured, just done with the sport. And it's just me. And I'm all like, I feel like I'm pushing my luck with the sport. Like I'm still healthy. I can still move weight, but I'm all like, for how much longer? A lot of these guys, once they hit like 40, they're already done. And almost no one hits lifetime personal records in their mid 40s. It's rare. So for me, and this ties back to your thing about competition, competition is so important. And for me, the most important thing about competition is it gives me a deadline. So if I'm committed to a competition, I have a certain window where I can do a certain amount of training sessions in order to get ready for that competition. And if I do not do that training the proper way, I will not perform the way I want to perform. So it lights a fire under my ass to get my training done because, like anyone else, I get lazy about training. There's some days I don't want to do it. I just don't. And when I have a competition, I have a deadline, it's motivation for me to do it because I can't make it up. I mean, that day is going to come regardless. I can't push it back. And if I don't do the amount of training I need to do, I'm not going to do well and I'm going to feel bad. You know what I mean? So for me, I'm very goal oriented as a person, as many people are. So for having a specific target for a specific thing is essential for my motivation. So, and I think if more people would do that, and they don't have to do something crazy like Highland Games, like most people can't do that. Like if you're not
Yeah.
deadlifting 400 pounds, you're not doing Highland Games. It's just not going to work for you. But there are things like Spartan races, which I've done. I think you've done it as well. That's really
Yep.
cool, and it's accessible to most people. Again, you got a deadline, you got to train for it. You're going to do it. Um, there are indoor ones available. There are, just traditional sports like marathons and things. Just have a thing to do. Bodybuilding show, if you're into that sort of thing, same deal. You're going to be naked on stage at that time, so you better do the work, or else you're going to embarrass yourself. So, for a lot of people, especially professionals that are very goal oriented, competing and having targets and deadlines is a really essential part of this whole thing, especially for the motivation factor. Because as you know, probably your listeners know, it's real easy to kind of push training and nutrition to the side. And then all of a sudden, it's been like 3 or 4 weeks. You're like, whoa, what happened? You know what I mean? It happens all the time. Like
Yeah.
you get busy at work, you're involved in some project, you're having trouble with the kids, all of the above, whatever. Then all of a sudden you're sitting there like, shit, it's been a month since I've been to the gym. And obviously, you can't go to the gym once a month and think you're going to maintain your health. Unfortunately, you got to have a certain amount of consistency. So this is one tactic that I've used and I've really helped my people use to keep themselves motivated to make sure they're not missing too much, which is easy to do. It really is.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like the deadline is so key. And what I have clients, what I tell them all the time is make sure the deadline is something other than like a Monday. Like you said with the competition,
You're always
whether
on
it
Saturday,
be
man.
yeah, a wedding, an anniversary, something like like tie it to something and make sure someone that you love and care about knows about it because you're less likely to let them down. And you can usually get set up for success. So
That's a whole topic there is, especially with people with families. Now, if you're a single person and you live alone or you have a roommate, it gets real easy to, not real easy, but it's simpler to implement this lifestyle. And especially if you're doing something significant like a competition or say like, yeah, you're going to a wedding or something, you're going on vacation, you want to have like pretty abs and whatever. When you're by yourself, you can set your lifestyle up like that. But when you're married and you have kids and the rest of your family is not on board, that can be pretty tough. Because I'll tell you what, if you're trying to clean up your diet and your family's sitting there eating ice cream, you're eventually gonna fail. You're gonna have a bad day at work. You didn't sleep enough. Like you're feeling bad about whatever, and that ice cream was on the table, and you're gonna be like, you know what? Fuck it. Here we go. And that's another thing people have to contend with. Is like, okay, your intervention that you need to get to this certain point is going to require that your family be on board with it. Is that going to happen? And if the answer is no, then it's like, it's not going to happen then. Like, you're not going to get there. So, this is one of the many variables I have to factor in with a lot of my people. And kind of what I do with people is I take these individuals, and a lot of them are like really high octane people. I got some people that do some really interesting stuff, just high level individuals. It's just like with Chat GPT, you get all these variables in. Okay, this is what my life is like. This is what my work is like. This is what my diet is like. This is what I like to do for fun. This is what my weekends look like. And you have to take all these variables and construct interventions in their life in a way that they can actually make it work. And that's really tricky. And Chat GPT isn't ready for that because a lot of that is basically behavioral psychology type stuff, which I found to be more useful than pretty much anything I learned in college. Because I was an exercise science major, and yeah, we learned a lot of things about details of exercise and how to read studies and all that. But the education I've given myself as far as behavioral psychology, persuasion, how to program people, that has done more than any of that. So, and that's basically what I do. I kind of joke about people with this. I brainwash people for a living.
oh, that's 100% what we do.
That's absolutely what it is, and it's
Yeah.
hard to do. But man, once you get that in there, it's a beautiful thing. But a lot of people seem to think that the problem they have is they just don't have the right program or the right diet in front of them. And I'm like, that's not it. It really isn't.
Mm.
The problem is your daily habits don't match the outcome that you want. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So the name of the game is how do we, how do we implement that? How do we put interventions in your life that you can actually make work to get to where you want to go? So, and that's hard to do. It really is. And I actually get a lot of kick out of it. It's a lot of problem solving. It's a lot of if thens and stuff like that. I think it's cool. Obviously, if I didn't think it's cool, it wouldn't still be a lifetime doing this thing. But I really enjoy it. It's a really rewarding thing.
All right, so last take. I guess we're on the topic here. We started off the episode with a lot going on in the sporting world, specifically around women's sports. We've touched on this before. You've seen transgender women fighting in MMA matches around the world. You have a transgender woman is the number one ranked swimmer in collegiate swimming. You have a lot of track and field athletes that are transgender women that are switching and dominating. Like they're setting records, like 17 records a year. Um, in terms of, and you're seeing it in powerlifting, right? So some states are allowing it. I want to say like 21 states have banned it. I want to say Alabama was the most recent one to issue a ban on any public funded event all the way up through college. As far as like when you, a lot of it is there's hormone suppressants, they're on testosterone blockers or hormone blockers or whatever, they're calling them now. To limit their performance. So there's not much of a difference. And when you look at like powerlifting and things like that, like what's your take on the transgender athletes and how that affects and how that might potentially, affect the landscape in powerlifting?
So this is a very, very touchy subject because it's very politically charged, and a lot of people have strong emotions about it. So when we're dealing with this issue, I think it's really important to stay very fact based and very logic based. So I really avoid trying to make emotional appeals for this sort of thing, like it's not fair or this like that. That's not that's usually not how I address it. So I actually had a friend of mine at a gym ask me to provide some data for this. And this was early in the debate. This was like 2018, 2019, something like that. And she really couldn't find any real good data on the subject. So, me being, I guess, a strength expert, which is, I was like, yeah, I guess I am. It's kind of funny. Me being an expert and stuff, I did some research for her. So, look, just starting this preface with this: anabolic steroids, are they cheating or not? Like in sports, are taking steroids cheating? Do you consider that cheating?
Yes. Yes.
Why are they cheating? What do they do? What do anabolic steroids do for a human being?
They give you an advantage from a power output standpoint, strength recovery, right?
What else? That's it, right? So they don't improve your
That's
hand-eye
about.
coordination. They don't make you better at the sport per se. They make you bigger and stronger, and you recover quicker. That's it, right? Okay, so going forward, let's keep that in mind. That steroid use is banned and frowned upon in sports. I mean, you'll lose your Hall of Fame thing if they find out you're taking steroids. They'll take your gold medals away. So steroids are definitely taking steroids or cheating. So what I did is I took the comparable weight classes in powerlifting. So the 114 all the way up to the 198-pound class. So I think it's 114, 123, 132, 148, 165, 181, and then 198. And I compared the world records from different groups. So I took men's drug tested records, I took men's unlimited records, so basically drug using. And for women, we only have unlimited records. They don't test the females. And I will tell you that I've seen and I've met a lot of these top female powerlifters, and they're pretty obviously taking drugs. I mean, they got like the baritone and the male pattern ball. I mean, they're taking a lot of drugs. It's just pretty obvious. So anyway, the difference across the board, I put this in a spreadsheet, and I probably need to update it. It was a few years since I did this, but I took all the world records. So everything is equalized. So the difference in size between men and women gone, because at 165 pounds, everyone weighs 165 pounds or less, correct? And the top level people, especially the middleweights, there are no like obese champion powerlifters in the lighter weight classes. Like if you see a 165-pound male champion and a 165-pound female champion, they're both pretty jacked. So you kind of factor out that as well. So it's a really good comparison. Plus, these are world record holders. They all had good training. They're all genetically gifted. They all have good, equipment. They have everything. So So there's a really good comparison in just pure strength. So the difference on average between the men's unlimited and the men's drug tested was about 5%. And this is consistent with research I've seen on Olympic lifting as well. And Greg Knuckles put a thing up a few years ago about that, where really the advantage you got from steroids in strength sports is about 5%, which is massive, by the way. In top level sports, 5% is the difference between first and like 50th place. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
huge, huge difference. Then I compared the women's unlimited and the men's unlimited, and it was 25% in favor of the men. But what really got me was when I compared the drug using women versus the drug free guys. And the drug free guys had a 20% advantage over the women. What that
Oof.
tells you is having a Y chromosome gives you 4 times as much strength benefit as anabolic steroids do. And this also kind of cancels out the argument about, well, men have higher testosterone levels. Well, those unlimited girls are taking stuff like Tren, okay? Like they're taking a lot of anabolic steroids. So their male hormone levels are sometimes 5, 10, 15 times higher than the drug free men. But the drug free men completely outperform them because the difference is just more, it's not just hormones, it's a physiological thing. So if we think steroids are cheating in sports because they give you that much of a strength advantage, then how is being a biological male having a Y chromosome also not completely unfair?
Very true.
And if you look at sports, strength is a factor in all sports. You look at combat sports, which you brought up, which, fun fact, 2 out of the 3 skull fractures that have been experienced in female MMA were done by the same biologically male fighter. So this one person, biological male, has 2/3 of all the skull fractures in female MMA. So that gives you an idea of how that really shouldn't be a thing. Um, but yeah, it's combat sport has weight classes for that reason. You have different weight classes because the higher weight classes are stronger than the lighter weight classes. It's not they have more skill. It's not that they have more experience. It's they just are bigger and stronger, and that gives you an advantage. Which is why you don't see super heavyweights fight featherweights. It wouldn't. It'd just be even if you put a subpar heavyweight with a top level featherweight, just because of the size and strength difference, it wouldn't be fair at all. But for some reason, putting a biological male and somebody that developed as a biological male in with a female, that's supposed to be fine? I'm sorry, no. And another thing is where we talk about hormone suppression, how do you test that? Who's going to test that? Same thing with
Right.
if we're demanding people go through a full transition. Like if I run a powerlifting meet, which I've done before, am I going to have to look at people's genitals and make sure that they're female? Do I have to like have them drop trial and look? I don't want to do that. Like
Well,
what?
have you
Not practical.
yeah, did you see, we talked about this before, did you see the podium picture for, Lisa Thomas at the championship for
That
swimming?
and also there's a really persuasive picture as well is when they were all taking off, like diving off, and Leah Thomas was about a foot and a half higher up in the air than everyone else, just
Yeah.
because there was that much more actual power in the thing. And I got to say one thing: this pronoun thing that's going on is so thorny that I've gotten to the point where I just don't use pronouns anymore. I just call people by their name. I don't want to step in that minefield anymore. I just
So
don't.
here I was thinking about this and maybe I overthought it, right? So for the most part, whatever. You have pronouns, cool, whatever. I don't remember a time, like, so I'll give you an example. Let's say your pronouns are he, him.
Right.
If I'm
You
talking to
assume.
you, I would hope. No. um but like I would never in conversation with you, I would never use your pronouns. So like are you giving is it like and I don't mean to be insensitive if this is going to sound insensitive to some people, but like are you giving me rules on how to talk about you assuming that I
You
spend my
have
days
to
talking to other people about you? Like I would never be like, "Oh,
because they're talking about third person pronouns. Like if I'm talking to you, I'm not using third person. That's weird.
yeah,
Like for either one of us, like it's nobody talks that way. So yeah, it's basically you're saying like this is how I want to be addressed to other people. But it's just like okay, like why does that matter? Like nobody's talking to you, and people in private are going to do what they're going to do. So like, why are we playing this game? Like I don't
yeah, it's
know.
such an odd thing. It's like, "Hey, when you go out there in the streets and talk about me, make sure you refer
Make
to
sure
me
you
as
use the right
he."
pronouns, buddy. Another thing that gets me too is the people that use plural for pronouns. I'm like, dude, you're singular. You're not they. Like, you're one person. They is like, once we're starting to demand that everyone alter how the language works, I'm all like, yeah, I don't want to do that. Doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. Like, and of course, then there's the laundry list of like made up pronouns, zim, z, zer. I'm just like, I don't know what those are. And if you want me to use it, I'm 100% going to fuck it up. So I'm just going to call you by your name. Can we do that? That's way simpler for me. Okay. And
Yeah,
when I talk about you, I'll just talk about you by your name. So, I mean, I guess it's me making a concession to this whole thing, but like, I just don't, like most people, I don't want to get yelled at. And I don't
true,
want to like get someone all upset, honestly. Like, I don't want to make you mad over something. Like, that's not cool. So, we're left with trying to find solutions, like ways around this because it's complicated. Because, like, yeah, when you're talking about someone, like we're talking about Leah Thomas, I'm like, ugh, like, I want to say he, but like, that's a, huge controversy. I'm misgendering. And there are people losing their jobs over using, purposely using, wrong pronouns. And some countries are talking about making it illegal. I'm just like, Jesus Christ, I'll just avoid pronouns then. Just, we're talking about Leah. There, that's your name. Cool. That's all I'm going to do.
true. Also, thank you for correcting me. It's Leah. It's not Lisa. Sorry.
Yeah, Leah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a crazy world, but yeah, I gotta let's wrap it here.
Sounds good.